Welcome everyone. Today I will show you my long time requested Blood-Zerker build for Dragon Age 2. This build is the ultimate damager warrior. It can easily deal thousands of damage, but it's a bit squishier than the regular warrior. Now, this is not a solo build. I recommend you bring the party, but most of the footage will be me going solo so you can see the raw damage of the Blood-Zerker. Going with the team not only increases your survivability because Evelyn can just guard you, but your mages can also heal you as well. You can even improve your damage with the party because the mages can apply haste and other buffs on you, and you can also detonate cross-class combos. So with that said, let's just get into what this build is all about. So this is basically a Reaver Berserker build designed to deal as much damage as possible. The goal is of course to get rid of enemies quickly, so we're not really gonna use our auto attack, we're just gonna buff up and then use abilities to nuke them. By using the correct abilities from the Veilguard, the Reaver and the Berserker tree, we can deal an incredible amount of damage in a very short period of time. The damage is so high that even the healthiest boss type enemies can go down in seconds. So let's take a look at the attributes first. As you can see, I invested heavily into willpower. I will explain why later. I also placed quite a few points on strength because of the equipment requirements. And finally, I placed a few points on constitution so that I could have more health. Now let's move on to the skills. First, the buffs. I use two buffs to improve my damage. One is Cleave, which is basically a 75% damage boost, and with the upgrade it can even stagger enemies. And the other one is Sacrificial Frenzy. Now, Blood Frenzy is a necessary passive of the Reaver. It will give you bonus damage based on how much health you are missing, and Sacrificial Frenzy is basically gonna double this bonus, which is why if you activate it, it's gonna cost a little bit of health instead of stamina. The combination of these two skills is gonna result in a colossal damage boost. So now that we know how to buff up, let's look at the skills that can deal damage. By far the best and my personal favorite is Assault, which is essentially 3 quick hits that everyone around you will feel. After the two buffs, this is gonna be our first skill that we're gonna use against the crowds. Usually it's enough to kill most of them instantly. Keep in mind that the upgrade also detonates disoriented enemies, so this works very well if you have a rogue in the team. For example, Varric's spinning shot with the disorienting shot upgrade has a 100% chance to disorient enemies, even bosses and elite bosses. So this can be an easy way to instantly kill any elites. The second offensive skill is gonna be Scatter. Although it's a one-hit skill, it still knocks enemies back, which can be extremely useful if you're being mobbed up. And finally we have Shield Bash, which is the weakest skill from the three, but it's still useful because it can knock enemies back. The last mandatory skill that we need to pick up is Devour. Initially, Devour is just an additional way to heal, but with the upgrade it can stagger and stun enemies. This stun is actually very powerful. Not only it works consistently on normals, but it also has a very high chance of applying on bosses and even elite bosses. So now that we got the mandatory active skills out of the way, let's talk about the sustainable skills. I picked Control from the Vanguard tree because it gives plus 10% attack, and with the upgrade it also gives plus 10% critical chance. The other sustainable skill will be Berserk from the Berserker specialization. Initially, Berserk will add 10% of your remaining stamina to your damage. While you sustain it, it also consumes stamina with every hit. The two upgrades are pretty much mandatory because one will lessen the amount of stamina you lose after each hit, and the other one will increase the damage that you get after your remaining stamina. So with the upgrades, Berserk will add 15% of your remaining stamina to your damage for the price of only 2 stamina cost after each hit. So now let's talk about the skills that are not mandatory, but they can still improve the build. I picked up Pommel Strike because I wanted an additional way to stun enemies. I also got Stonewall because it reduces the amount of damage I take, and it's also pretty good against knockdown effects. Destroyer is excellent for lowering enemy damage resistance, and if you still have skills left, you can pick up Massacre, which is gonna kill any enemies below 20% health and any elites below 10% health. Normally it's advisable for a Reaver to pick up Fervor, because the second an enemy dies, you get a massive speed buff. However, since I don't do much auto attacks with this build and I didn't have enough skills, I decided not to pick it up. Also, from the Battle Master tree, Bolster, Second Wind, and Deep Reserves are all great with the Berserker spec. However, at level 22, I just ran out of skills. Now, let's get to the equipment. So the weapon I'm using is Desdemona's Blade. As you can see, it only deals 17 damage, but don't worry about that. How much damage your weapon deals in Dragon Age 2 doesn't really matter. What matters is what you're using it against. So, for example, this weapon deals nature damage, so I'm using it against anything that's weak to nature, like Kunari, Shades, Arcane Horrors, Desire Demons, Pride Demons, and even Deep Stalkers. I also have a backup weapon called the Mountain Father's Haft, which deals spirit damage, so I'm using that against Darkspawn, Undead, Templars, and Corypheus. My shield is the Shield of the Night herself, which is originally a gift for Aveline, but you can get it for yourself. It has the wonderful enchantment of 100% basic attack damage versus enemies that attack in melee. Now, if you don't know what this means, it's essentially like damage reflection, but it's far more effective. Every enemy who tries to attack you from melee range, it doesn't have to be a melee attack, it can be ranged or even magic as long as it comes from melee range, they will suffer your normal attack damage. Normal attack in this enchantment means whatever your normal attack would be when you hit an enemy. And yes, this can be boosted with our buffs. I also have this enchantment on my rings since it stacks. This is an excellent way to gain additional damage, completely overshadowing our auto attacks. In fact, the return damage deals so much damage that it even rivals our buffed ability damage. So I do recommend that you stack that enchantment because it's gonna work really well with this build. The rest of my equipment comes from the Warrior Pack 1 and 2 DLC because using them is the best way to maximize your damage. So how do you level this build? Well, first off, I recommend that you pick up the Reaver specialization first and not the Berserker. This means that you should put most of your attributes on Strength instead of Willpower. You can place a few points on Constitution as well if you want more health. Get Assault, Cleave, and Sacrificial Frenzy as fast as possible so you can start dealing some very respectable damage. Once you reach level 14, respec, get the Berserker spec, invest most of your attributes into Willpower, and place enough on Strength to equip your gear. Additionally, you can invest a few points into Constitution if you feel too squishy, but you should have no problem if you bring a mage who can cast Heal and Barrier. You can get Barrier for both Anders and Bethany, and they can apply it on you at different stages of your health. Also, Aveline's Bodyguard is always welcome. As you can imagine, I had a lot of fun with this build. It's just so nice when the warrior can kick some ass like the rogue. Yeah, you can't take that many hits, but that is what Aveline is for. Let her stand around and get punched in the face. I wanna deal some damage. So with that said, I will leave you with some footage of this build in action, and if you want to, give it a try. Good luck!